Beware of spoilers. I am Adam, and I am also regretting my outfit decision for today because it is a Friday, and I did not think to look at the full weather report before getting dressed this morning. That would have been the smart thing to do. I simply looked and thought, oh, it's 60 degrees, let me put on sweats and wear a sweatshirt, and here I am, slowly frying, extremely tired. So, we're here to talk about Pennyworth, the secret origin, or the origin of Batman's Butler. I keep saying the secret origin because that's been DC's naming convention forever at this point. And for whatever reason, this show does not do that. I feel like that was a dumb decision. And yeah, it's a dumb decision. Like, I don't understand why they didn't go with the secret origin of Batman's Butler. Maybe the title gets too long then. Maybe there's a character limit on HBO Max in the title field. Because I think doing the origin of Batman's Butler, I understand from a marketing standpoint, like, that's the thing. It's like, you look at this and you're like, this was a decision made by the marketing people, not the creator behind the show. And like I said, it's like the show is season 3. The show was born out of, we saw Agent Carter do well on ABC. Sony was developing a Spider-Man prequel movie about Aunt May being a spy in the 60s, and it's like, everyone fucking loved that subplot in, in Amazing Spider-Man, where he goes off to try and figure out what spy antics his parents were up to. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you look at this whole thing of where this show came from, and then, a prequel show for the Alfred Pennyworth that we see in Gotham. Maybe not necessarily the most necessary story, but whatever, here we are. Having migrated from Epix to HBO Max, well, let's talk about what this, the big thing in the first 3 episodes, I will say, is probably the end of episode 3, ending with, it turning out that Bruce Wayne had also, or not Bruce Wayne, Thomas Wayne had also been, I don't want to say whammied, because that's the Salem CW, and it's not really, well, no, we'll just say whammied, and he ends up doing, trying to kill Martha, and, look, I totally get that. It could be a cool twist. But we know where both Thomas and Martha Wayne die, because we know how Gotham begins. Gotham begins with the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne, because it is the origin of Batman. And I don't quite understand why, that's not exactly something that you, oh my god, did he kill Martha? It's like, well, no, probably not. Unless it's like a Ron Swanson kind of thing where it's like, okay, so this Martha dies, but he marries a second woman also named Martha, and it's like, that's just his thing. It's like his mother's name was Martha too. But it's just such a weird thing. And I feel like the issue that I had with the first 3 episodes, keeping in mind I watched them about a week ago at this point, because I watched the whole season for spoiler-free review, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, without spoiling what comes after, I don't quite like the first 2 episodes with the girl kind of wrap up entirely very quickly. It doesn't feel in line with the show itself. It just kind of feels off in a weird way, and I'm not entirely sure why, but maybe that story does need to go a little bit deeper. I mean, that's probably really all it is, but the story doesn't quite go deep enough with this at this point, where it's like, okay, so they can do that. And keeping in mind, too, it's a 10-episode season, we're on episode 3, it is kind of a thing where it's like, well, nothing too serious is going to happen right now, because we got 7 episodes to go. And then when you put the origin of Batman's Butler in the thing. It's like, maybe there are people who didn't know the prequel to Gotham. Well, no, but they're still an self eternal character in 9 times out of 10. Like, the show isn't terrible. I do like some of the action sequences. I do like, his accent can get a little annoying. And John Boy's hilarious. I do like, I'm sorry, not John Boy. John Boy was from the Waltons, Dave Boy. Like, he's pretty funny, and I do like, he reminds me of the guy that Peter Capaldi had as his second in command in Thick of It. Was it the Thick of It? The show that was kind of like what Veep was based on. In the Loop was the movie, but like the guy he had who was kind of like a friend who would help him out and do things. That's what he kind of reminded me of. But like, fact of the matter is, he's never been mentioned before. This guy Dave Boy, and it's like, I get it. I get what you're going for. I understand what this is trying to do. I just don't think it's working well enough to make the show interesting or compelling. And again, it's like, there are very few stakes, and then to end your cliffhanger at the end of episode 3 on the attempted murder of Martha, it is just that. It is the attempted murder of Martha, because we know Martha is not going to die. Like, there is no way they kill off Martha Wayne in the 3rd episode of season 3. Like, come on. Like, were you born yesterday, and you're like, oh my god, is Martha gonna die? Like, come on. It's so silly that that's where you end off the first part of the season on. What else was there? I don't know. I just have so many, like, not questions even. Because questions make it seem like I have, like, legitimate, like, gripes. And even if I did have questions, I couldn't really voice them because there are things that get answered in later episodes, and it's like, well, why? Like, it still doesn't quite work for me. I don't know. Let's see how the show continues. It is an interesting, you know. I mean, I'm not against the period piece aspect of it. Totally not against that. Would I like to see, you know, them do something a little bit more interesting and different? Absolutely. And I think that's why I'm okay at the period piece part of it. Is that, like, you know, it's not something that we see on every other show. And I think that's why I'm kind of okay with it. I don't know. I'm also exhausted right now, and I'm on my way to see a movie. I'm on my way to see Amsterdam to do a review of that tonight. It has been a very, very long day. But I think that, like, for a show that is rebranding as it moves to another network, there is this kind of disconnect, again, between marketing and the show itself. And I think that comes down to the show itself is not, like, one hand isn't communicating with the other. The marketing team is not communicating with the, what's it called? The marketing team is not talking to the production. Or the marketing team is making decisions after the fact, based on the fact that they're now running the show wholesale on their own streaming service. So, like, the idea that we have this show kind of happening, and I don't know, I just kind of feel weird about the whole thing. Because it's like, this is your opportunity to, like, rebrand in a way, or try to introduce yourself to a new thing. Like Supergirl, when Supergirl changed networks, it did not need to change, because the numbers that Supergirl was getting on CBS were not great for CBS and for the budget it had on CBS, but it was great for CW. Even if it lost some, they would have been fine with that, because it was pulling numbers that were surpassing The Flash. And The Flash's highest, and The Flash was, for a good amount of time, the highest rated show on the network. So it'd be like, oh, okay, we'll take, even if we take, like, half of what they're pulling now, that's still way better than we can hope to get with anything else. So the CW looking at that and how that all, worked, they didn't need to make colossal changes between season 1 and season 2, besides the downsizing changes that come with we now no longer have the budget we used to, so we have to make some cuts and some decisions about what is and is not going to stay in the way that we have things running now. And beyond that, though, it really doesn't need to change anything. It'll work as well as it works. Pennyworth has the same opportunity, but you're changing your audience now. And you're definitely expanding your audience. I don't think Epix has the reach HBO Max does. But if you don't know what Pennyworth is, it's not like the show in the first 3 episodes really goes out of its way to make a case for why you should watch it or why it's worth your time on a weekly basis. And I think that's kind of a mistake in general. They needed to make a stronger showing, I think, of I'm here, why should I stay here after this point? What is there for me beyond this episode? And I don't think the show makes the case that it really needed to in order to move the needle. Because it does feel very like jargony inside baseball. Like when we walk into what was the other show that was when you start Star Wars, you get the sense that the galaxy is lived in, and the galaxy is this wide thing with tons of species all doing things and all living lives, and there's galactic politics and all this stuff happening. You get that sense when you start it, but it's not done in a way where someone feels like there's existing history that I don't know about that is equally important to understanding everything going on here. Like, someone can walk in cold, as millions of people did. Someone can walk in cold to the Star Wars, to Star Wars, and not worry about missing anything. I feel like they don't really have that here, and I think you need that a little bit. You need to clean up what you're, what's going on in the show. Not clean it up in a way that's like anything else, but treat it kind of like a second pilot almost, and be like, okay, so we have this opportunity here. We have this fantastic opportunity to start over and reintroduce people to this show and reinvent ourselves into being something new and unique. And part of the problem, I think, in my own opinion, is sticking with the fact that it's a prequel to Gotham. Sticking with that definitely makes it, does tie your hands a little bit, because you can't exactly jump in and be like, okay, and here's this character, because we know that character exists years down the line in Gotham. It's like, well, maybe that's part of the problem. But looking at it that way, I mean, it's a big missed opportunity. I think these first few episodes is not going. If you haven't seen the first two seasons, like, these 3 are not enough to bring you up to speed to the degree that you need to fully enjoy the show. You will eventually. Like, the show will eventually get there. I'll give it that. You do eventually get to a point where you do understand everything and all the relationships and everything, and everything feels like you're not missing anything anymore. But there is that learning curve, and people don't want a learning curve when it comes to starting a new TV show. And they certainly don't want required reading of having to go back and watch 20 episodes of the past season to catch up. I mean, I don't think this is a controversial take. I think that's just viewing habit. I mean, I know for me, certainly, it's like if I'm starting a new show, like if I'm going to start a show on a later season, I'm going to be able to jump right in. Like, there are shows that retooled after its first season, and the second season functions standalone. Like, for example, Rebels, Star Wars Rebels, is a perfect example of this. That first season is kind of bad. it's kind of not a great first season, because the first season is very committed to weekend on a weekly basis, show up and do something totally, non sequitur, and it's like, oh, and here are the rebels. They're like the origins of the rebels. They're fighting the Empire. Yay! Like, it's set between 3 and 4, and then by the time season 2 starts, you get into more serialized storytelling, and you get into this point where it's like, okay, so now we're going to treat this the way we would treat any other serialized fiction, and we're going to treat it with maturity. We're going to, we're going to show what we could do with this material, and it is a big difference in storytelling. And you don't have to have watched the first season of Star Wars Rebels to have understood the second. You can kind of jump right in, and it is this great idea that I just feel like this show missed that opportunity in a colossal way, where they had a chance to bring people in a new, like, bring in, you have your chance to increase your audience and make the case for why your show should exist, and you just completely ignore that. It's like Call Me Kat had a similar thing. It's a network show on Fox. Had a kind of similar thing, where season 1 was basically unwatchable. I couldn't stand that show. Then it gets picked up for season 2. It was kind of on the bubble, but it does eventually get picked up for season 2, and you're like, alright, cool. Picked up season 2. Maybe they'll use it as an opportunity to be like, okay, so we barely got renewed by the skin of our teeth. Let's rework the show, try and figure out how to make the show better, and then move from there. And it doesn't do that, and the ratings are about the same. So season 2 ends, it's on the bubble again, it gets renewed, season 3 comes back, and again, functionally the same show. Now, 3 times. And I'm just like, well, what the fuck? Why wouldn't you make an attempt at least to retool the show between seasons? I don't understand that aspect of the decision making. And now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I own a TV network. I'm not going to sit here and act like I have all the answers or anything like that. But they were given a very unique opportunity, and they did not take it and do the most they could with it. And I think that's probably the biggest issue I have with this season premiere, is that there was definitely room for improvement between season 1 and season 2, or season 2 and season 3. Well, not even room for improvement, but room to bring people on, like an on-ramp, and they don't really give that. But we'll wrap up there for today. I think that's enough on Pennyworth. Our next episode will be tonight about Amsterdam, the David O. Russell movie with Margot Robbie and John David Washington and Christian Bale, which is supposed to be pretty not great. But we'll find out, and we will render a judgment on our own the movie starts in about a half hour. So, until then, have a great rest of your week.